So, have you ever tried to read the Bible, gotten a few pages in, and just felt totally lost? You're not alone. Maybe you've heard it's full of contradictions, that it's a book at war with itself. Well, today we're going to tackle that head on. We are going to unlock the single most important key to understanding this ancient and, let's be honest, often confusing collection of writings.
And yeah, that confusion, it starts right on page 1. In Genesis chapter 1, the order of creation seems pretty clear. First plants, then animals, then man and woman are created together. But then you flip the page to Genesis 2, and the order is shuffled completely. You get man first, then the plants, then animals, and finally, woman is created.
So what's the deal? I mean, is this a massive error on the very first page? It's a totally fair question, and it actually points to a much bigger idea about what the Bible really is.
To solve this puzzle, we've got to ask a really basic question. Are we reading one single book, or is it something else entirely?
You know, the biggest clue is hiding in plain sight, right in the name itself. The word Bible comes from the Latin word biblia, which is plural. It doesn't mean the book, it means the books, plural. And this, right here, is the game changer, the most important shift in perspective you can have. The Bible isn't one book, it's a library. It's a collection of many different books written over hundreds of years by dozens of different authors. And thinking of it that way, well, it changes everything.
Okay, so if it's a library, let's take a quick tour, shall we? What kind of books are actually on these shelves?
Man, this library is incredibly diverse. You've got these dense law codes in books like Leviticus. You've got sweeping historical stories in 1st and 2nd Kings. There's beautiful, emotional poetry in the Psalms, and super practical advice in the wisdom of Proverbs. You've got prophecy, personal letters, and even this wild, symbolic genre called apocalyptic literature in the book of Revelation.
And think about it, right? You'd never walk into a library, grab a book of poetry, and read it like it's a legal contract, or read a history book like it's a song. It just wouldn't make sense. Every single one of these genres has its own rules, its own style, and its own way of getting a message across.
Let's actually see how this works. The book of Exodus gives us this perfect side-by-side example, describing the exact same event in two totally different styles.
First, in chapter 14, we get the historical narrative. It's prose. It's pretty straightforward. A strong wind blew all night, it pushed the water back, and bam, dry land. It's a factual, almost journalistic account. But then, in the very next chapter, we get a song, a poem celebrating that same event. And look at this language. God's right hand shatters the enemy. His burning anger eats them up like dry grass. So, is this a contradiction? Did God literally use a giant hand and breathe fire? No, of course not.
They're just two different genres looking at the same event through different lenses. The history tells us what happened, the poetry tells us what it meant. It uses these powerful, vivid metaphors to communicate the absolute devastation of the Egyptians' defeat and the awesome power of the one who saved the Israelites.
Now, this process of figuring out genre and context, it's not just random guesswork. It's actually a discipline with its own toolkit. It's called hermeneutics.
Now don't let the fancy word scare you. Hermeneutics is just the method of interpretation. It's a set of principles that helps us bridge these huge gaps in time, culture, and language between our world and the world of the Bible. It's basically our tour guide for this ancient library.
And you don't need to be a scholar to use it. Here are 4 basic keys anyone can use. First, ask about the historical context. Who is this originally for? Second, what's the genre? Is it a poem, a letter, a story? Third, look at the language itself. Are we dealing with metaphors or figures of speech? And finally, try to figure out the author's main goal. What was the big idea they were trying to get across?
Okay, now that we've got our keys, let's circle back to those tricky spots we started with and see if we can unlock them.
Let's start with the big one, right at the beginning of Genesis. How in the world do we make sense of those two very different-looking creation accounts?
Well, they aren't two competing accounts trying to tell you the same thing. They're complementary. Think of it like a movie. Genesis 1 is the epic, wide-angle establishing shot. It gives you this grand chronological overview of the creation of the entire universe. Then, Genesis 2 is the zoom in. It's a close-up that focuses on the most important part of that story, the creation of humanity, and it explores our purpose and our relationships in much more detail. One tells us what happened. The other explores the how and the why.
Okay. But what about when the Bible gives two different numbers for the exact same event? I mean, that feels like a pretty clear contradiction, right? Take this, for example. In 2 Samuel, it says King David captured 700 horsemen. But in 1 Chronicles, which describes the same battle, the number is 7,000. I mean, 700 versus 7,000. That's a huge difference. Is one of them just plain wrong?
Well, not necessarily. We got to remember, before printing presses, every single one of these texts was copied by hand, and it's totally possible this is just a simple scribe's error. Or it could be a matter of perspective. Maybe one author counted the total cavalry, while the other only counted those who were captured. In any case, the main point of both accounts is exactly the same. David won a huge, decisive victory.
All right, let's tackle one last one. What about when two of the Gospels seem to put the same events in a different order? This happens at a really crucial moment, the crucifixion of Jesus.
Okay, so here, a tiny but crucial detail gets lost in the English translation. We see the word and we think, then this happened. But in the original Greek, the word they used is kai, and it's much simpler. It just connects two events. Think of it less like an arrow and more like a plus sign.
This means the author's main point isn't about the precise 1, 2, 3 sequence of events. It's about simultaneity. They are making a powerful theological statement by linking these two monumental events, Jesus' death and the tearing of the temple curtain that separated people from God's presence. They're showing that his death is what opened the way to God for everyone. They just chose a different order to emphasize that point.
So when you look at it this way, the Bible isn't a puzzle box full of contradictions that you have to solve. It's an ancient library full of different voices, different styles, and different genres, all contributing to one grand, overarching story.
I love how the 19th century preacher Charles Spurgeon put it. He said, "Nobody ever outgrows Scripture. The book widens and deepens with our years." Understanding these texts isn't a one-and-done kind of thing. It's a lifelong journey of discovery.
Learning to read the Bible well isn't about having all the answers. It's about learning to ask the right questions. What kind of book in the library am I reading right now? Who is this written for? What's the author's main point? The tools are actually pretty simple, but they unlock a whole world of meaning. So now that you have the keys to the library, the real question is, what will you discover?